Hello everyone, welcome back to Odds Now. The new EFL season kicks off this coming weekend, which means punters up and down the country are in the process of planning out their season-long Antepost bets, dreaming of winning a small fortune, I'm sure, by combining selections across the three divisions in the Championship, League One and League Two betting markets. So what better time to run through all of those markets in detail ahead of the kick-off this weekend. We've got our own resident EFL expert, Matt Hill, on screen. He's a huge Carlisle United fan, has been tipping and betting successfully across these markets for over 12 years now. As you can see, joining me here today. First of all, Matt, before we get into it all, how are you doing?
Very good, Brad. Yeah, successfully is probably stretching it a little bit, but I have my moments over the years. But yeah, you probably should over 12 years, shouldn't you, have some winners? Yeah, I just love it. Absolutely love doing these markets, playing them. And it's the beauty of it is you do your little investment now, you put it away, and it's something to follow throughout the whole year, isn't it? And if you can click a couple of multiples, it can be a lovely top up into the summer holiday fund. So hopefully, over the next however long it takes, we'll be able to identify some value. But it is that time of year where everyone's coming out with the usual suspects, bringing the pullouts out and the writing the columns and what have you. So it's that annoying thing sometimes where you fancy something, then somebody tips it and you see the price starting to crash, and it's a big panic to try and get on before the price goes. So hopefully by the time you're watching this video, those prices haven't all crashed, and if you do want to get on for the ride with me, then you can still get on at decent odds.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Here's to hoping that all comes through. Matt's going to be doing the bulk of the talking here today, but I'll be navigating you through things throughout. We'll start with the Championship. I think it's a natural place to start, Matt. We'll start with the outright market. You'll see the odds running along the bottom of your screen. I think the Championship is probably one of the best products football has to offer. It's so entertaining last season with all the twists and turns along the way. Who are you going to be backing to come out on top in this season?
Yeah, well, anyone that's kind of followed me, knows me, read my stuff, knows that generally I like to oppose favourites wherever I can. I like to pick something from a little bit further down that gives me a bit of a bigger price. But, sometimes you just have to keep things simple. And I'm afraid that the more I look at this league, I think Leeds are an absolute good thing. I'm tempted to say it's the strongest bet from across the three divisions, but I won't say that because then you wouldn't watch the rest of the video, would you? So I'll just say I'm quite confident in Leeds here, and it looks like a lot of people are with me as well, judging that there was some 72 available until early this morning. Now there's not even any 10-3. It's 3-1. They could go off even shorter between now and the weekend. I would not be surprised. A lot of sort of wise heads coming out and really backing Leeds to dominate this division. And I think it's with good reason as well. When I start to assess the Championship, the thing I like to do is look at the three relegated teams from the Premier League in the previous season. It tends to be a good barometer. Let's take last year, for example. You had Leicester, Southampton and Leeds coming down. Leicester went on to win the league quite comfortably. Leeds and Southampton were in the playoff final against each other, Saints going up. Leeds, the unlucky outlier there. And that was because of an Ipswich team who really were a freak. They did a double promotion. Unbelievable achievement from Kieran McKenna's side. And that was a little bit of an odd anomaly, but that just gives you an idea. These Premier League sides that come down, generally speaking, have a huge advantage because of the extra wage structure, the parachute payments, etc. However, I looked at these three clubs and I just couldn't get that enthusiastic about any of them, really. Suppose if you start with Luton, they did really well just to get into the Premier League, didn't they? That was their achievement. That was their miracle. They're a really well-run club. But I thought even when they went up into the Premier League, I was impressed with the way they did their transfer business because they didn't just go chasing big names, marquee signings. They signed quite shrewdly. They picked up some of the Championship's better players. Looked like they were almost planning for what was a semi-inevitable relegation. And they were building like a Championship super team of sorts. And I think their manager, Rob Edwards, is a really level-headed guy. I think they're in a really strong position to push for the playoffs again. They're about third or fourth favourites in this betting market. However, Luton, even when they were at the peak of their powers 2 years ago, weren't really competing for the title. So I'm not in a rush to back them to win the title. Then I moved to Sheffield United, who were arguably one of the worst teams in Premier League history last season. Shipped 104 goals in 38 Premier League matches. It's unbelievable how many goals they shipped. They brought in Chris Wilder, club legend, midway through the season to try and revive things. It didn't work. There was no uplift. They were relegated with a whimper. I think undoubtedly this Sheffield United squad is much worse and much weaker than the one 2 years ago. got them promoted at a canter. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're battling just for a top 6 finish the way it stands. It looks a little bit of an imbalanced squad to me. And I would make similar comments for Burnley, who were the last relegated team. I do think Burnley are probably the likeliest of the three to challenge for the title, and the market agrees with that. Although a lot of upheaval this summer, they lost their manager, Vincent Kompany. Amazingly, he managed to get Burnley relegated and gets himself a move to Bayern Munich. So fair play to his agent. But Kompany did get them promoted to the Premier League with an amazing style of play, really attractive football. And he probably was guilty of what we see with a lot of managers that bring free-flowing sides up. He didn't adapt his style of play enough for the Premier League. He still thought he was going to be able to play this free-flowing football against Premier League teams. It didn't work. They seemed to cotton on and change a few things late in the season, but it was a bit too little too late. That said, they do have some good quality in the ranks. They've retained a lot of key players. They've brought in Scott Parker, who I have very mixed views on. On the one hand, he's got good, solid championship experience, getting Bournemouth and Fulham promoted. But if you talk to fans of either of those sides, they generally don't have that much positive stuff to say about Parker. He had strong squads in both of those seasons, and he kind of achieved par by getting them up, I think it's fair to say. And then once he got into the Premier League, quite turgid style of football, ended up getting sacked from both posts. And he's had a disastrous time in Belgium recently with Club Brugge. I think he was sacked after 12 games. So he's trying to rebuild his stock. So I'm not in a rush to get with Scott Parker either. So that leaves you with Leeds and then all the teams that were in the Championship last season. And the gap between Leeds and those other teams last season was seismic. The closest in terms of points was West Brom, who were 15 points behind them. Middlesbrough was 17 points behind them. Coventry, 19 points. Everyone else was 20 or more. I'm not sure any of those teams, as good a shape as some of them are in. I mean, I'm impressed with Middlesbrough. I really like Coventry and Mark Robbins, but I don't feel like they've done enough to make up 19, 20 points on this Leeds team. Looking more specifically at Leeds and their transfer business, they have lost Crescencio Somerville, who was their best player. Felt a little bit inevitable that they would lose him. They've lost Archie Gray, who's a very talented young winger, come through the ranks there. But again, felt inevitable, and he didn't play. He wasn't in the first team long enough for him to be a massive miss. In those two sales alone, they've recouped £55 million, which is an obscene amount for the second tier. Their squad is still extremely strong. They have depth in all areas. And I've not seen anything in their transfer business to make me think they're going to be any weaker than next year. And I still think with all that money coming in, we're going to see some big signings from Leeds between now and the window slamming shut as well. So they're only going to get stronger over the next few weeks. And finally, the final piece of the puzzle is Daniel Farke. He's had 3 seasons in the Championship. Every one of them, his teams have had 90 or more points. So he's an unbelievable tactician at this level. Very unlucky not to go up automatically last year. That said, lessons learned from last year, his players will be a little bit more familiar with him. He will be a little bit more familiar with how he wants things to go at Ellen Road. This is definitely a weaker Championship than last year, and I think Leeds could win this at a canter, to be honest. So for all the reasons outlined, that 3-1 looks a more than fair price for me.
Okay, so Matt's going for Leeds to win the Championship. We'll see how he thinks the rest of the playoff places will fill out. We'll go on to the top 6 market now, Matt. I think the odds will be along the bottom of the screen for that as well. Who do you see coming in from 2nd to 6th?
Yeah, an interesting one. All the teams I mentioned there have got good credentials. Like I say, I think Luton have handled things very solidly, and they're in good shape to have another competitive season. I see Burnley being there or thereabouts. I have my worries over Sheffield United. West Brom have a fantastic manager in Carlos Corberán. I think he's possibly the best manager in the league. So they should be there or thereabouts, although they're in a little bit of an odd financial position where they're having to get like deals ratified by the EFL. There's a few teams sailing close to the wind financially in the Championship, as always. So you do have to factor that in as well. I do really like Coventry for a top 6 finish, but as my actual selection, I've decided to put up something at a slightly bigger price here, and you'll have to bear with me here. It's Sunderland at 10-3. That price is available right across the board, and I think a lot of people will raise eyebrows at that one because Sunderland had quite a poor season last year. Fair to say they finished with a whimper as well. Went through 3 managers. Tony Mowbray was sacked, replaced with Michael Beale, who had a disastrous time at the Stadium of Light. And then popular club figure Mike Dodds took them through to the end of the season. But they failed to score in 8 of their last 12 games last year. They took just 9 points from a possible 45 from mid-February. I'm not really selling it, am I? They finished 16th in the end. But if you look at the first 2/3 of the season, they were a playoff level outfit. Before that dire run, before the managerial chopping started to happen, they were outside of the playoffs just on goal difference. So there is a capable squad there. And I actually think this squad, in terms of raw talent, is right up there with the very best. It's a very youthful squad as well. Right from back to front, Dan Ballard at the back, Northern Ireland international, it is one of the finest defenders I've seen at this level, all the way through to Jack Clark up top, who or on the wings, who was an absolute revelation last season before he sustained a knee injury. He scored 15 goals before February. And ironically, when he sustained that knee injury was when things started to go a bit wrong for Sunderland. A lot of talk that Clark may leave the club. A lot of interest from abroad and from the Premier League. As it stands on the 7th of August, he's not going anywhere. Looks like he's going to start the season at Sunderland. Really big boost for them, that. And this is all kind of on the manager, the new manager who's come in. And it could go one way or the other, but I think there's a really strong chance that this goes well here. It's a Frenchman coming in. He's called Regis Lebris. I may have butchered his name there, so I'll just warn you. He's a 48-year-old Frenchman. He came up through the ranks in academy and reserve football in his native France, and over a decade of managing youth teams. So I think he's a really nice fit for this Sunderland squad. He plays progressive attacking football. He had 2 seasons in Ligue 1 with Lorient. Now, you've got to take this with context, because the first season, he guided them to a 10th place finish, which was the highest they've ever finished. Really young team, playing really exciting football, got lots of praise. The second season, they got relegated from Ligue 1. Now, there's some key information here in between those 2 seasons whereby he had a bit of a falling out with the director of football and the owner. He wanted to go a different way with transfer policy. Ultimately, as tends to be the case, the bosses at the club got their way. They brought in more experienced, big-name players with egos. And according to the fans from Lorient and the people that saw this on the ground, Lebris was very open in saying that he didn't agree with the transfer recruitment. He was unhappy. He tried to leave the club, but was in the end forced to see out the last year of his contract. And it went as badly as you would expect with all that kind of noise behind them. However, fair play to Sunderland. I think they've tried to look beyond that and understand the circumstances here. And they see the football that he did play with that young squad, exciting. And it's a bold managerial appointment, isn't it? So many times we see the same old names off the merry-go-round come in. But I think this Sunderland squad is young. It does have a little bit of an edge to it. And they've took a risk with the manager. And this is a bet where I'm quite going into it knowing that this could go wrong. They could finish, they could be struggling after 10 games, sacking the manager, and it could be a write-off season. But if it clicks with this guy, it could really click. And it might be worth looking at their promotion. And I'm stretching it here, but their title prices as well, because if it all clicks together, this could go fantastically well. I'm hoping for Sunderland fans' sakes, long-suffering Sunderland fans, that this is going to be a good season for them. And I think the 10-3 about them sealing a playoff spot, it's got to be worth having on side just in case everything comes together.
Okay, and we'll move on then to the relegation market, Matt, at the opposite end of the table. Is there anything that stands out to you there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this. The usual suspects, I'm hesitant to say that, but you won't be that surprised by the teams on your screen there, really. Oxford only just coming up through the playoffs. They were quite fortunate to get up. I'm not even sure they were the best team in the League One playoff places for a long time. Plymouth Argyle, a lot has been made of Wayne Rooney's appointment. I think your general football fan sees Wayne Rooney as a bit of a joke figure probably now in these kind of jobs. He's not had the best start to his managerial career, it's fair to say. But I'm not sure that that's going to be quite as disastrous as people are anticipating, really, because he's had a little bit of difficult circumstances in both of his last 2 jobs at Derby and Birmingham. Derby had a financial crisis, and Birmingham sacked a very popular manager in John Eustace and brought in Rooney as this kind of figurehead and asked him to completely rip up and change the style of play midway through the season. Well, a lot of the players didn't want Eustace sacked. So he was already coming in up against it, Rooney, and I think it's very easy to sort of draw him as this idiot who's just getting jobs based on his playing career. I'm not sure that's the case. And Plymouth generally have been very savvy in the last few years. They've identified some really up and coming intelligent bosses, and I don't think it'll quite go as bad as everyone is fearing. So that means that there is a little bit of an interest in these teams, and I've pulled it up here because I want you to see all of these teams. You can make varying cases for all of them. Preston, I'm in no rush to get against because they always seem to find a way in this division. They've been in the Championship for over a decade now, and they're very established. Blackburn are quite short because they've got potentially some financial issues coming with their owners, the Venkies, which could complicate matters. Always got to factor that in these divisions. And then further up to Watford, who've been a popular selection amongst some experts and tipsters, a little bit of a club in crisis. Could they dip into League One? Seems a bit unthinkable. All that said, the team that I want to take a bit of a flyer on is Millwall at 9-2. Now, Millwall have been a fairly established Championship club for 6 or 7 years now. Before that, they were regulars in League One. They can literally float anywhere between a playoff push and a relegation battle in this league, Millwall. And it all just depends on year by year how they come into things and how the mood is. Well, I'm not sure about it this year because they had a bit of a disastrous season last season in that they tried to change the style of play quite drastically. If you think of Millwall, you think of like passion on the shirt, flying into tackles, aggressive, hostile, physical, the Millwall way, I suppose. Well, they hired Joel Edwards to try and change that. And it just didn't quite work, unfortunately, for him. The home form in particular was abysmal. He was sacked. And what did they do? They did what a lot of clubs do in times of crisis. They brought back a club legend to the dugout in Neil Harris, and he steered them to safety. Fair play. It was a really impressive end to the season. I think they won 8 of their last 13 with him coming in. But I have my reservations about Harris as a manager at Championship level. He's got quite a good record at coming into clubs and making an immediate impact. But tactically, I find him a little bit one-dimensional at times. It is that sort of long ball, physical, set pieces. It's a good fit for Millwall, really. But it just surprises me how quickly they moved away from the idea of, okay, we want to change our style now. Oh, no, we'll hit the panic button and we'll go back to our old style. There doesn't seem to be much joined up thinking at board level for me. So that's a little bit of a worry. And then I look at the recruitment as well, and it's a little bit confusing for me as well because I feel like Millwall want to play quite direct, physical, hostile football. You probably want a big centre forward. So their marquee signing has been Macaulay Langstaff, who's been ripping things up in League Two and the National League over the last couple of years with Notts County. He's been breaking goal scoring records at that level. He's a fantastic player. But he's playing in a Notts County team who are probably one of the best passing sides those levels I've ever seen. So it's just a really odd fit for me. I'm really excited to see how Langstaff gets on in the Championship, but I'm not sure this is the club he should have joined. And I feel like Millwall have maybe just thought, he's got a great goal record, let's sign him, rather than does he fit into our style of play and all that. And it's just all these kind of alarm bells that just worry me a little bit. And like I say, the clubs that are actually at the bottom of this market or expected to go down, I actually think they might outperform things a little bit. Oxford, as much as I say they weren't the best team in the League One playoffs, their form in the last 3 months of the season was exceptional. I think they've got a good young progressive manager in Des Buckingham as well. So I think they'll make a good fist of it. Teams, when they first come up, generally do make a good fist of it, don't they? Plymouth, for the reasons outlined, I'm not going to take on. So there's a good chance that 3 of these teams who think they're safe could be slipped into a relegation battle. And yeah, Millwall at 9-2 are one to have on side for me.
Okay, and our final section on the Championships, always an entertaining market to take a look at. I think that's the top scorer market. Sammy Smodics came out on top last season for Blackburn. Who do you see topping the scoring charts this time around, Matt?
Well, huge price he was, Sammy Smodics. I think he might have even been 3 figures at the start of the season. So it just shows that sometimes it pays to think a little bit outside of the box on these markets. Ultimately, though, it's difficult to do so because when you're looking at you want someone who's playing for a big team, You want somebody who's probably playing centre forward. You want them to be playing at least 75% of the games, like in your head. And you end up with these same names that are all at the top of the market, the names that are going across the bottom of your screen. So it can be quite hard to think outside the box. But let's work our way through these top guys. Mateo Joseph, that'll be a new name for a lot of people. They're thinking, who the hell is this guy? This is Mateo Fernandez, young Spanish striker who's going to probably be leading the line for Leeds. They picked him up from Spain a couple of years ago. He's had a couple of loans and stuff, but very, very highly rated, very quick, pacey, clinical striker. I believe they knocked back bids for him in recent times as well from higher up clubs, obviously with the view of him becoming their main marksman. He's played through pre-season. He's had a good pre-season. He looks like he'll lead the line. And in the same way that I'm saying that Leeds look a solid bet and look like they're going to score loads of goals, people are just looking to get onside with Leeds forwards in this market. But I do think there's a danger that the Leeds forwards will end up sharing the goals out. You'll notice that Joe Perreault is listed at 16-1. You'll notice that Patrick Bamford and Jorginho Rutter are listed at 20 and 22-1. So there's already 4 names that could be sharing the goals around them for Leeds. So I think it pays to look elsewhere here. Emmanuel Latelath will be a popular selection. Middlesbrough striker, came in January, had a good finish to the season, will be a little bit more up to speed with the championship and how it works now, and he's in a good Middlesbrough team as well, and he'll be the focal point there, so I can see the argument for him. But the one I landed on is actually a Coventry forward, and it's Haji Wright. And people may have seen a little bit of Haji Wright on Coventry's phenomenal FA Cup run, where they were one horrendous offside decision away from being in the FA Cup final against Man United. Looked like they'd scored a winner, went on to lose on pens. But yeah, Wright showed the best of himself that day, and it just generally, what a great season the American had, first season in the Championship. He scored 19 goals in all competitions, 16 of them coming in the league. He can play off the left and the right as well, but that doesn't seem to impact his goal threat. He's still scored half of his goals playing on the flank. He's playing in a Coventry team that have got better and better and better every year under Mark Robbins, and you feel like it's a matter of time before they get that promotion to the Premier League. Certainly expect them to be in and around that top 6 this year. So I think, for a first season to be getting 16 goals, and to have that extra year of experience in the division and to still be in one of the top teams in possibly a weaker championship, I think Haji Wright's a fantastic bet there at 20-1. And just somebody I mentioned earlier as well, who I think is worth having on side, Jack Clark from Sunderland. Similar to Wright, he could play through the middle, he could play attacking mid, he could play wide. But one thing he does do is he gets goals. All 15 of his goals last season had came by February when he sustained a knee injury, which kept him out for 6 or 7 weeks. There was a managerial change, and Sunderland really went into like a cycle of doom by the time he returned. So he didn't get back amongst the goals there. Again, just hesitant to add that there is rumours around Jack Clark's future at Sunderland. You do have to place this. That has been factored into the price a little bit as well. I think that he could move, but with every passing day that he remains a Sunderland player, and with the season about to start, I think this 33-1 is worth a small stake as well for another interest. But yeah, Haji Wright, my strongest selection, and Jack Clark also there at 33-1.
Okay, that concludes our discussion in relation to the Championship. We'll now move on to League One. I think it makes sense to start again, Matt, with the winners market. Who's going to be your best pick for this one in the third tier of English football, of course, League One?
Yeah, this is all revolves around Birmingham City, doesn't it, this year? One of the biggest teams in memory to drop into League One, but we have seen plenty do it before. Leeds, Nottingham Forest, Sunderland. And one thing I think, common theme that we can deduce from their time in League One is it's not easy to come out of League One at the first attempt, and it's certainly not easy to win the title. Now, just to caveat that, Birmingham, we've never seen a side strengthen and spend money like Birmingham are doing. I mean, if they were doing this transfer business in the Championship, it would be described as eye-catching. And this is all to do with their ownership model. They've got, American investors. Tom Brady's involved, isn't he? Wayne Rooney was hired by that investment group as well, and that proved to be a bit of a disastrous decision in terms of undoing the season and eventually leading to this shock relegation. All the talk in Birmingham had been about getting up into the Premier League as quickly as possible. Now they've had to take a step back, but they certainly, on the face of it, look to be building a bit of a super team here in League One, and they're very understandably being put in as short as 2-1 favourites. They are shorter in places. Now, it'll split people one or two ways. People will either look at Birmingham and say, this is the best team League One's ever seen. That 2-1 is an absolute banker, and they could be odds on within a couple of weeks if they win their first games comfortably. This could be like 100 points job. It really could. But for me, I try and pick holes, and I think there are some holes there. The manager, Chris Davis, has been hired from Tottenham. He's got a really good pedigree as an assistant boss, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will translate to being a good manager. We see lots of assistants struggle when they step out of that number 2 into a number 1, and he couldn't be stepping into a more pressurised situation, could he? Because Birmingham are literally expected to walk this league. So any early losses and the pressure is going to be all over him. Is he up to the task? Blah, blah, blah. So if I add all that in, and there's some recruitment from Europe, which I'm presuming is very good, but I don't know an awful lot about them. I also have to factor in that League One is playing Birmingham in League One. That's going to be a cup final for most of these teams. They're going to raise their game. They're going to relish going to St Andrews. And everything we've seen before with these kind of teams, I can't back them at 2-1. I understand they might win by the 100, might win it with 100 points. I'm happy to let them run and take that risk. I had to play somebody each way, and with the each way terms, if you could get an each way, pick a team to finish second or third, you will actually get an equivalent or better payout than back in Birmingham to win the league. So I'm playing this league each way. Bolton are the second favourites, but I've actually landed on the third favourites, which is Rotherham 11-1. So if Rotherham finish in the top 3, you get an 11-5 payout on your place, which is slightly higher than 2-1 on Birmingham. So that is my reasoning for that. But with the added bonus that if Rotherham do win the league, you cop a massive payday. So that's the thinking there. Let me talk to you a little bit about Rotherham. They're being managed by Steve Evans, probably the most polarising manager in the EFL. He's not everyone's cup of tea, the big Scotsman, to put it lightly, but he does have an unbelievable track record when it comes to being backed financially, being allowed to build his own teams and delivering. When he is hired and given a blank checkbook and almost said, do what you want, he tends to deliver. His last job was possibly the best example to date when he managed to get Stevenage promoted out of League Two when they were highly unfancied. They nearly won the league. And then again, they spent a bit more money in League One and he nearly got them into the League One playoffs, which they had absolutely no right to do. So I really do rate Steve Evans really highly as a boss, and he's been allowed to, he's gone back to his old club in Rotherham, a club he got promoted out of this league a decade ago in 2014. And he's been given his blank checkbook by the owner. He's done all his business early. Trademark Steve Evans. He's signed some of his old favourites as well. Johnson Clark-Harris comes back, big centre forward, knows the level, top scorer at this level a couple of times. He's signed really shrewdly in other areas as well. And I think that players like Reece James, Joe Rafferty, Liam Kelly, these are all typical Evans signings. They know how he wants to play. He knows how he's going to deploy them. He's going to put his arm around their shoulder and tell them they're the best players in the division. And he's just a master of this kind of thing. And he will play, I guarantee you, if you listen to Evans' interviews throughout this season, he'll be playing Rotherham as the underdog, little old Rotherham all the time, even though Rotherham have probably got one of the biggest budgets in the division. He'll be using everybody thought Birmingham would storm this league. We're just doing well to compete. He's a master of it. And this just looks like textbook Evans for me. I expect him to get Rotherham promoted. And the 11-1 each way, I think, is an absolute no-brainer. So that's how I'm playing the winner market.
Okay, and like we did with the Championship, we'll move on to the top 6 market. Matt, what stands out and catches your eye over there?
Yeah, top 6 finish is an interesting market as well. You could just play Rotherham, my selection there at 10-11. I have backed that as well on a couple of multiples. I think that's rock solid. But if I'm trying to pick out a selection a little bit outside of the box there, looking a little bit further down the betting market, I think Charlton are in for a really good season here, 15-8. Disappointing last year. Similar story to Sunderland, really. Finished lower mid-table, not where they would expect to be finishing, certainly in the third tier. It's a massive club, We all know if they get moving in the right direction, then they could be, well, the former Premier League club. The sky is the limit for Charlton. They've had some rotten issues with ownership over the last decade. We're more accustomed to seeing tennis balls being thrown on the pitch than anything else at the Valley recently. Glad to say that appears to be behind them. And what a fantastic managerial appointment they made in bringing Nathan Jones to the club last season. We already started to see his impact in the closing weeks of the League One season. The former Luton boss, who, of course, masterminded promotions out of League Two and League One with Luton, and also set the wheels in motion for their marvellous Championship promotion, which was finished off by Rob Edwards. Don't forget, because Nathan Jones got headhunted by Southampton in the Premier League, such was the fantastic job he did. Now, Premier League fans will remember Jones as a little bit of a laughable figure who made a little bit of a mug of himself in press conferences. He is a hostile figure, an interesting character, I think is a polite way of putting it. He has a lot of self-belief. He's a very religious man, and yeah, he can rub people up the wrong way. If you don't like him, you probably really don't like him. But one thing he does do is he makes a real us against the world environment at the clubs that he gets his teeth sunk into. And I think his tactical knowledge is among the best in this division. I think he's had a full summer now to recruit the kind of players that he wants to bring in here at Charlton. Still think there's a little bit of work to do, but Jones is more than good enough to get these guys really competitive really quickly. Really eye-catching signing was Luke Berry, someone he worked with so closely at Luton during that success, and I think he'll expect Berry, who's quite an experienced EFL player now, to set the standards at Charlton. I really like a couple of his forward signings as well that we will come on to, one of which I've put up for top goal scorer, but Gasson had had, mate. But I'm also going to reference Matty Godden as well, who has been there and done it at the Championship. Is now a veteran in his 30s, but still got plenty to offer. So I think that they'll have no problems replacing Alfie May, the top scorer last season, who went to Birmingham. So yeah, I think Charlton are in a really good place. I think the future's really bright for them with Jones at the helm. Might need another year to actually get up, but I think this year they'll be bang among it. And I think 15-8, about a top 6 finish, looks a really solid bet.
Okay, and we'll go again towards the bottom end of the table, Matt, and the relegation market. Who do you think could be heading for the drop in League One this season?
Well, looking at the prices, Crawley, understandably, huge odds-on favourites. They were actually favourites for relegation from League Two last year and managed to get promoted. So that won't faze them being written off in all corners. Crawley, I won't dwell on them too much. For those who don't know, are owned by a group of cryptocurrency people based in the US. They've tried a few different techniques of how they want to run this club. Done some really questionable stuff that rub fans up the wrong way with their comms side of things, social media side of things, business decisions, a lack of presence in the country. But one thing they did absolutely nail, the head honcho of this group, a guy called Preston Jackson, outsourced his recruitment to some data geek, basically, and they used some data system to just pluck players out of non-league and all, players that didn't even have any pedigree at the conference, never mind League Two. And what they ended up doing is moulding this like super team together last year who played some fantastic football. And it was all glued together by Scott Lindsay, their manager, who is still in charge at the moment. But I don't think his achievements at Crawley last season will have gone unnoticed. I think Lindsay will have plenty of offers from other clubs throughout this season. And I think that might be one of their toughest battles, actually, keeping hold of their manager. But the other thing to say about Crawley is they've been absolutely gutted in this summer window. All of those players that they unearthed from non-league have been sold off for profit. Not that much profit either. I think that's one area their ownership model do need to learn on. They found these great players, but they didn't really tie them down to good contracts. I think they've sold them off for a pittance, really, in the grand scheme. But that is kind of why Crawley are such short favourites to go down. But I'm actually scared to take them on because this guy who's doing the data modelling for the recruitment, he is obviously a very smart man to pluck all these guys out of non-league and find so many gems. So what's to say he won't do it again? I think it's a lot harder in League One, but I'm not gonna back them at odds on to find out. I'm not going to take on this data geek. So, good luck to them. I'll look elsewhere, thanks. I think Shrewsbury are really solid and probably likely to drop. They were lucky to beat the drop last year, to be honest. And they are the kind of team that yo-yos between League One and League Two. But let me put up a team at slightly bigger odds. And I think I've got 3-1 on this graphic, but they're now 11-4, so they're being nibbled a little bit. It is Stevenage. I talked about Steve Evans before. He was headhunted by his old club Rotherham at the back end of this last season. So just as Stevenage they had a really good go at making the League One playoffs last season, but just as that became mathematically impossible in April, it was announced that Evans would be leaving the club and going to Rotherham with immediate effect. Little bit of a housery from Evans, shall we say there, to leave his club before the season had even finished. But we come to expect this from Big Steve. He was actually in the Rotherham dugout for the last game of the season. So Stevenage have appointed internally to replace him. They've brought in Alex Ravel, former Rotherham and Stevenage striker, actually, who was part of Evans' backroom staff. Now, Ravel actually had a spell in charge of Stevenage a few years ago, when he was still a player. He was their player manager for a period. He managed to keep them up in League Two in a relegation battle, but the season after did not go well. He was sacked quite quickly. Things unravelled quite rapidly, I would say, for him there. So this is a second chance. It's a show of faith from the Stevenage board. They obviously rate him very highly as a human being. He comes across as a nice bloke. He speaks very well, but I just have these lingering doubts about his last spell and has he learnt enough in these 2 years in the backroom staff? He'd already worked under Steve Evans before his first go at management. So I'm sceptical as to seeing what would have changed that much between last time and now, if that makes sense. So they've also lost some key players as well. Terence Van Kooten was a massive player for them last season. He's gone. I'm not sure on the recruitment. There's a couple of risky signings in there that could fly or could sink. And just generally, when I add in Ravel, I add in the recruitment, I add in the loss of Evans, probably a reduction in the budget after failing to get into the playoffs last season. They don't have big attendances, some of the lowest attendances in the division. So I worry about Stevenage regressing massively here. And I think at 3-1, I could quite easily see them going down. So Stevenage, my pick there.
Okay, and finally, for League One, we'll move on to the top goal scorer market. Matt, which names stand out for you in that column?
Yeah, well, just like the winner market revolves around Birmingham, this market revolves around Alfie May, who was last season's top scorer in League One for Charlton. He's been signed by Birmingham as part of their summer spending spree ready for League One. So, it's quite logical. What do you do when you drop into League One? Sign last season's top scorer to lead your line. Makes sense, I suppose. But I don't think it's a shoo-in that he'll just instantly hit 30 goals for Birmingham, because he's never played in a team where they're expected to win every single match. There's going to be a hell of a lot of low blocks, teams going for a 0-0 draw against them, trying to keep it tight, sitting deep. May is quite a tricky, dynamic striker that relies on space in behind and exploiting space in behind. I actually saw him play against my team, Carlisle, last season, and Carlisle managed to keep him relatively quiet because we were so unambitious with our setup. We were so negative that he just didn't have a lot of space to operate in. And I think that will happen more playing for Birmingham. He does have fantastic players around him to create the chances. So it could go one of two ways. But I think you can realistically take him on at 9-2 or 4-1, as he is in most places now. So I'm having two darts in this market again. One of them is a very obvious one. It's a second favourite. It's a man I've already referenced in Johnson Clark-Harris, who will lead the line for Steve Evans' Rotherham. He will play virtually every game as long as he stays fit. He's been League One top scorer before for Peterborough. Peterborough chairman Darragh McAnthony used to reference him as the League One GOAT, League One Haaland. You make chances for him. He scores at this level. He's definitely on the wane a little bit, I think. Into his 30s now. He's probably not the force he was a few years ago, but he's a very effective player. If you just minimise what he actually has to do and just get on the end of stuff, he can do that all day long. Couldn't think of a better manager to look after him than Steve Evans. Johnson Clark-Harris stays fit. There's no way he doesn't score at least 15, 20 goals in this league, and that should be enough to be pushing for a place. And I wouldn't be surprised if he wins it. So that 12-1 there at Bet365, I would definitely recommend people take that. And then as is the theme generally for these markets, I like to have a little bit more of a dart on an outsider. And another player that I already referenced here, and again, I might butcher the pronunciation, Ghassan Ahadmi. That is one of Charlton's 2 forwards that they've signed to help replace Alfie May's goals. The other one is shorter in this market. Matt Godden is 25-1. But Godden although he's been playing in the Championship with Coventry and a couple of other clubs, he's now 32, 33. His best years are probably behind him. And even in his peak, I would never say he's been an absolutely prolific goal scorer. He's always been a good foil in a 2. I always think of Godden as if he's up front with someone who's prolific, then, he's a very useful player and he'll probably chip in with about 10 goals himself. Now, this Ghassan Ahadmi is a little bit of a stab, admittedly, but he did have a loan at Cambridge last season in this league in a pretty poor Cambridge team, and he scored 13 goals. I think that's so crucial when you know the level and you know that they can perform at this level. Now, he scored 13 goals last season for Cambridge in only 30-something appearances. He's going to be playing regularly for Charlton. When Jones signed him, he described him as his number 1 target for the summer. He was delighted to get this deal done. They've signed him on a permanent. He signed a 4-year deal. So a real project to work with. He's still young. I think he's 23. But already shown he can do it at this level. Jones obviously sees him as a key part of the future at Charlton. And I think playing next to Matt Godden, he's going to get plenty of chances and he can more than fill Alfie May's boots. So I think 40-1 is absolutely huge. I'm really, really keen on that one, actually. And I think the 40-1 might vanish soon. So if you do want to get on that one, be quick. I think that's with Ladbrokes and Coral, 40-1. A couple of other places have cut today.
Okay, that concludes as well our preview of League One. We'll move now onto the 4th tier in the English football pyramid. That's League Two, of course. We'll start again with the winner market. Matt, who stands out there for you to not only earn promotion to League One, but also win the title too?
Yeah, well, the League Two market should be my specialist area, really. My team play in this division. That said, we were relegated tamely from League One last season, so I'm maybe a little bit behind my usual levels of homework. But one thing I think we can definitely conclude with League Two, this is the most competitive league out of the 3 by a mile. There's about 10 teams that will fancy the chances of winning this league this year. It feels like I'm listening to a lot of previews and stuff of teams and a lot of people expecting a big year. So that means a lot of teams are going to be disappointed ultimately. I think Chesterfield, it's generally accepted, are a little bit wrong favourites in this market, false favourites. They came up they won the National League last season. So they won the National League with like 100 points. Amazing team, really, really impressive. And they've got a manager in Paul Cook who's been promoted out of this division before, a real veteran of the Football League, managed teams like Portsmouth. So, expectation won't be a problem for Cook and for Chesterfield. But I just look at, in a reference for comparison, teams we've had come out of the National League, impressive teams in recent years, Wrexham, Notts County, Stockport. None of these teams have managed to win the league in their first season in League Two. They've done well. They've been good teams, but they've always been around playoff level. That jump is a little bit higher than I think people give it credit for, certainly the odds compilers. So everyone is trying to take on Chesterfield in this market. Not out of disrespect to Chesterfield, just because it feels like it's the right thing to do. And you'll see on Odds Checker, Chesterfield will be red and there'll be a few of the teams that are blue. For me, it was quite obvious who I wanted to get with out of the alternatives. It's MK Dons at 8-1. That price, I say general, is getting chopped left, right, and centre. I think a couple of people must agree with me. So they could be down as to 7-1 chances. They could be favourites by the time people come to back this. I think they should be favourites, to be honest, based on everything we've seen. They're managed by Mike Williamson, a name that Premier League fans might remember, former centre back for Newcastle. He was cutting his teeth managerially with Gateshead in the National League, and he had a fantastic 3 or 4 years with them, implementing this really possession-heavy, dominant style of football, which is not easy to do in the non-league where there's a lot of physical, disruptive sides. But they did it ever so well, this Gateshead team. They were one of the best teams to watch in the conference under his stewardship. MK Dons, he was linked with a few different jobs in the Football League last season. MK Dons took the plunge, brought him in midway through when they made a sluggish start. And wow, he instantly implemented some great football. They were scoring 4, 5, quite, most weeks, what it felt like anyway. Goals were flowing. Unfortunately, they were also conceding a lot of goals, but that's like a teething problem you would expect with implementing a style like that. But when it works, it looks really, really good. And yeah, I really, really rate Williamson as a coach. I'd be amazed if he's not in the Championship, maybe even in the Premier League in the next 3 or 4 years. So I'm really keen to get with him, particularly given the recruitment. They've just gone above and beyond to give him players that are going to suit this system down to a T. And then you add in the fact that the players who've already been with him for a few months are very much now aware of how they're meant to be playing and how he wants them to play. So I think there's just so many positives for this MK Dons team. I could actually see them dominating the league and winning it quite comfortably. But I don't think you'll go far wrong with an each way poke on them at 8-1. One point that I should reference, because a lot of people will be thinking it, they got decimated in the playoff semi-final by Crawley. They went into the Tyres favourites. They lost 8-1 on aggregate. It was an absolute humiliation. But it was a second leg where they were already 3-0 down, and the 3-0 had been a little bit of a smash and grab. And I think Williamson maybe just told his team to go for it, really go for it. And some of the goals they conceded in that second leg were actually comical, like suicidal defending. I think he'll have learned a lot from that. He's a really smart, progressive coach. I think that'll hurt him. He'll have stewed on it for a few weeks, but I think they'll come back better and stronger. And like I said, the recruitment and the extra time he's had to implement his methods, a full pre-season will surely do wonders. I think MK Dons are going to be the team everyone is going to want to watch from a football perspective this season. Even if they are hated as a club universally across the EFL, they're going to be great to watch. And I think Mike Williamson is one of the best coaches in the EFL.
Okay, and then we'll shift our focus onto the top 6 market. Matt, who stands out there for you as a bet to place ahead of the new season?
Yeah, well, actually, should know it's top 7. So apologies, I got that one wrong. I just realised that, but obviously 7 in the. I've got used to League One life. But yeah, it's top 7 in League 2. The 4 go up, so we've got an extra place to play for. Makes this market a little bit more appealing, I guess. And like I say, so many teams you could make a case for in this market. Like it's really. I think that come the end of this season, there's going to be some really disappointed teams with how their season's panned out. But I'm actually going for a team that aren't listed on the bottom of your screen, which tells you again how open this league is. My selection here is Fleetwood. The general price of 3-1. That's very much available across the board. The main reason I'm getting with Fleetwood, they were one of the relegated sides alongside my team, Carlisle. Carlisle went down rock bottom with a real whimper. But Fleetwood made a real fist of it, actually. They changed their manager midway through the season. They brought in Charlie Adam, former Liverpool and Blackpool midfielder. And it looked like a little bit of a jobs for the boys, to be honest, because he's from, he's spent a lot of his playing career in that area, probably knows people at the club. They do have a reputation for just giving prominent figures. Joy Barton springs to mind, just hiring them off their playing credentials kind of thing. So when Adam went in, there would have been a lot of skepticism. But if you actually look at his results, did a really good job, I would say. It took survival to the penultimate weekend of the season. So we know that he can make a competitive team. And I really like their recruitment as well. I think he appears to be calling in favours from the huge contacts book I imagine he's amassed throughout his career. I saw he brought in a youth player from Liverpool and Everton's academies, so that's an obvious use. He's gone north of the border as well to pick up a player from St Mirren, and he's also gone back to his old club Blackpool as well. So he's making use of what he has available to him. And I think if they continue to set the standards that they did last season during Adam's tenure, then they'll be really close to the top 7. And Fleetwood, generally speaking, for all their off-the-field issues, when they're in League 2, they're normally at the top end of League 2. And this jump back down to League 2 won't faze many of the staff that have been in place for a long time. So, yeah, I think at a bigger price, they've got a real chance of being in the mix.
Okay, and we'll flip back down again to the bottom of the table, the relegation market. Matt, who do you think could be dropping out of the Football League in this one?
Yeah, never a nice market to discuss, really. You don't want to see sides crash into the non-league because sometimes they don't come back. And I'll caveat this straight away. This is a market I play very lightly because quite often in League Two, financial discrepancies end up playing a part in this market. There'll almost always be one club that nearly goes bust or gets a 15-point deduction or something like that. And there's only 2 relegation places, whereas the other 2 leagues have 3 and 4. So I'm in no rush to get stuck into this relegation market, really, but it is priced a little bit more attractively as a result. Morecambe are the 11-4 favourites. Morecambe are favourites for relegation in this league every year. They never get relegated. They always seem to find a way to stay up. Maybe their luck will run out at some point, but I don't think they mind being written off. And I think that it seems to galvanise them, actually. There was one season, not so long ago, where they were similar to Crawley, favourites to go down, and they went up. So, like, this won't phase them at all being written off. Bromley are next at 10-3. I think that's a lazy bit of pricing, really, because as much as I said about Chesterfield being false favourites, teams that come up from the National League never really go straight back down. National League promoted sides are generally an equivalent standard to a mid-table League Two side. So just because Bromley are unfashionable and we don't think of Bromley as an EFL club, they'll be competitive. They play direct physical football. Andy Woodman's the manager who, fun fact, was Gareth Southgate's best man at his wedding. But um, also has proven himself to be quite a handy manager. He's a character, so watch out for him if you haven't seen him before. Quite a big fella, speaks his mind, definitely stands out from the crowd. But he plays effective football. His Bromley players, he's kept the same squad together. Not a lot of churn there, which I think is really important when you go up. He's added a little bit of EFL experience. They'll be fine. They'll be mid-table. So you're getting into some juicier prices. Harrogate, I think, are vulnerable. Newport, I think, are vulnerable. But I'm going to go with the next team along, which is Accrington Stanley, who've had a great stint in the Football League. But unfortunately, all the noises and vibes are negative around Stanley at the moment. It all came crashing down very suddenly last season when their owner, Andy Holt, had a very public spat with their manager, John Coleman, and his assistant Jimmy Bell. Andy Holt's probably the loudest chairman in the Football League in terms of his Twitter page. He's very honest with the way he thinks the EFL's been run, very critical. But he came out, he was really upset about the fact that Coleman and Bell had came out in an interview with BBC Radio Lancashire and said that they felt their contract should be extended. Now, these two had been at the clubs for a decade, and they're a massive part of Accrington. They've overachieved hugely, built some fantastic teams. But Holt took offence to that. He didn't think that they should be airing that in public. He said that that was a conversation for behind the scenes. And long story short, they both got sacked. A lot of fans were really upset with the way they were treated by Holt. Holt spat his dummy out a little bit and said that he was looking to sell the club because he couldn't take it any further forward. All of this adds up to not great vibes for Accrington, really. Disconnect between fans and owner. Unproven manager now in charge in Jed Brannan versus who was, John Coleman, one of the most experienced managers in the EFL. So they've had a real shift in tact there. And yeah, if a team is going to drop, it could well be Accrington at 11-2. It pains me to say it because they're a good little club, but the wheels appear to be falling off a bit there.
Again, the final market we discussed today is the top goal scorer market in League Two. You mentioned earlier Macaulay Longstaff was breaking records down there for Notts County. He scored 28 goals last season, topping the scoring charts. Who do you think will come out on top this time?
Yeah, this is an open-looking market. 14-1 favourite in Andy Cook. So if you predict the winner here, you're going to get a nice big price about it. There's about 20 players priced between 14 and 25-1, which tells you how much of a muchness these are. But there's some good quality strikers in there. Andy Cook is proven course and distance for Bradford. He always seems to bang the goals. And had a little bit of a quiet season last year, must be said, by his own high standards. But he'll do the business, you would think, again. Will Grigg, there's a name everybody will remember from the past. Will Grigg's on fire. He's still knocking about. He'll lead the line for Chesterfield and did so brilliantly in the National League. So you can see the theme of these strikers sort of been there and done it. A lot of sort of journeymen. Actually, how it tends to go in this market is it can be an unexposed type of name that no one's really heard of. Maybe a loanee that comes in from a higher league and really flies. But then the danger with loanees you have is if they're doing really, really well, they may get recalled in January. So it's risky to know how to play this market. Out of the favourites there that are on your screen, there is one that I want to be with. you've heard me wax lyrical about MK Dons, so I want to back Callum Hendry at 18-1. He'll be playing an attacking role for MK Dons. He can play attacking midfield or off the flanks, but he mainly, I think, has been brought in to play up front. Scottish forward, and he's got a lot of pedigree at this level. He's been with Salford for a few seasons now. Salford seem to be scaling back a little bit in terms of their ambition and approach, I would say. But Hendry has consistently been one of their best players, and I think he could be one of the benefactors of this Mike Williamson system, where they just have a lot of the ball. He's a really good, smart, clever footballer and a composed finisher. So I think I'd be surprised if he's not among the goals. Hoping he can stay fit. That would be one word of warning. He has had a couple of injuries over the years. So let's wait and see there. And then I had to just give you something from my own club. It'd be a waste of knowledge if I didn't put it in. Charlie Wyke is Carlisle's leading hope in this market, according to the betting. He's in there at around 20-1. Experienced campaigner, has played for Carlisle, where he made his breakthrough, but also with Bradford, Sunderland, etc. Had a great career. A lot of people remember him having a cardiac arrest a couple of years ago at Wigan in training. CPR from his manager, Liam Richardson, saved his life there. So brilliant to see Charlie still playing. He's got the captain's armband for Carlisle. I'm really hoping he's going to have a good season. But I do think his minutes will be managed a little bit now that he's in his later years. And I think the forward to be with, from Carlisle's perspective, is probably Dan Adu Adje. Now, he's not actually priced up with a lot of firms because this loan was only completed last week. But this is the profile of a kind of player that often wins these kind of markets. A young player coming out on loan, relatively unheard of, just hits the ground running at this level. Now, he's had one pre-season appearance against Stockport. He's got on the score sheet there. He's very different to what Paul Simpson's other three forwards are. They have Charlie Wyke, Luke Armstrong and Georgie Kelly, all quite physical target men types. Adu Adje comes on loan from Bournemouth. He's been in Bournemouth's first team for their entire pre-season before coming out on this loan. The loan was agreed 3 or 4 weeks before it actually got announced, which is a good job because he scored a couple of goals for Bournemouth in pre-season. Apparently, Iraola was very impressed with him. Bournemouth fans really excited to see him go out on loan and excited to see what he can do. And I do think, for as much as I have some concerns about my own club this season, who doesn't, I do think we'll be pushing for the top half of the table, certainly. I think there's players there who, alongside him, will be a good foil for him and present him with chances. He looks pacey and he looks to have a really composed finish on him. So, yeah, he could have fun. He could have fun at this level. And I think that's the kind of player you want to be trying to unearth in at a big price. So, Adu Adje at 40-1 with Bet365 and William Hill could be worth having on side.
Okay, that concludes our final market preview of all the 3 leagues we've discussed today. Before we do conclude the video, I think Matt's going to pull up graphics for his best bets for each of those divisions that we've spoken about there. We'll start off with the championship best bets there, as you can see on the screen. Matt, do you want to briefly run us through your selections there to remind people where you're going?
Yeah, just accidentally teased all my others there as well. Don't be pausing the video. I will get to them in a minute. Yeah, let's start with the championship for the recap then. Leeds to win the championship is 3-1. That price is to be generally available. I think it will hold for a little while longer. 7-2 is all gone, sadly. Sunderland for a top 6 finish at 10-3. I'm chancing Millwall to be relegated. That's a little bit of a stab at 9-2. And then Hadji Wright and Jack Clark are my two top goal scorer darts in that league. Hadji Wright would be the more confident of the two. I think that 20-1. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get himself into the top 4 barring injury. So that's a 5-1 place runner, hopefully there. League One, as I say, not in a rush to get too much against Birmingham, but I just can't back them at the price with a rookie manager and with levels of expectation sky high. So I'm going to go with Rotherham each way. Tried and tested. Steve Evans knows what he's doing at this level, and he has a really good squad to work with as well. I think Charlton are going to make huge strides this season under Nathan Jones. You can get 15-8 about them being in the top 6. I don't think they'll have enough to get into the top 2, so you may want to play Sky Bets market, which is to finish in a playoff position, slightly different from the top 6. That would only pay you out for 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th, obviously. That's kind of where I see Charlton finishing, about 5th or 6th, and that is 5-2. So if you want to eke out a little bit of extra value, that could be worth a look. Stevenage are the team I think are in danger of the drop at a big price in League One after Evans' departure. I'm not convinced by Alex Ravel, not convinced by the recruitment. And then the top scorer darts, one safe one in Johnson Clark Harris, who is a line leader extraordinaire at this level. And Ghassan had me for Charlton, having impressed on loan at Cambridge last season. 40-1 looks big for him. And in League Two, as I say, MK Dons are the bet for me. Mike Williamson impressed me so much with the way he went about it last season. And I think the full pre-season and some astute signings are going to take them on to the next level in an open division. I think Fleetwood could go well under the radar with Charlie Adam at the wheel. And I fear for Accrington at 11-2, although I do always approach the League Two relegation market with a bit of caution due to the financial aspects that come with this level of football. The top scorer bets, Callum Hendry is the safe option at 18-1 in that MK Dons team. And Dan Adje for my boys Carlisle on loan from Bournemouth, hoping that he could fly and do well at 40-1 available with Bet365. And William Hill. And I've just summarised some fun bets that people might want to club together for these selections, Brad. So if you want to back my 3 league winners in a treble, Leeds, Rotherham and MK Dons, that is a 383-1 chance. So £5 on that would return you around 1,700 quid. Come May, if they're all landed, you could play these, of course, in a Trixie as well, which basically involves all the doubles and a treble. So if 2 of them win and 1 place, you'll still get a good payout, or if 2 of them win and 1 is nowhere, you'll still get a good payout as well. So costs more to put on, but a better chance of return on your investment at the end of proceedings. Promotion treble for those same 3 is a much safer 23.5-1, but I think really, really strong chance on that one. And then a treble in the alternative markets. I've gone for Sunderland to make a top half finish, Charlton to get into that top 6, and Stevenage. I think, no, that's meant to be Fleetwood, sorry. Fleetwood and League Two for a top half finish. And that pays 5-1. So that'll give you a great chance. We'll clarify all these in the description below. And then my final one, just for a bit of fun, Bet365 do these great season-long match bets where they pair teams up against each other and you've got to predict which one will finish higher. There's some of the favourites here that I just think weren't short enough, really, and you can just perm them all up for a really interesting acca across the season that must have a great chance. I mean, feel free to tell me in the comments where this loses, because I can't actually see it at the moment. Coventry to finish above Derby. I think Coventry are going for promotion. I think Derby will be battling to stay up. Similar comments for Bristol City and Oxford. I think Bristol City have got a lot more quality at the level than Oxford. Rotherham, who I'm keen on to finish above Barnsley, were a little bit in turmoil, I think, by their own high standards. Charlton, who I think will go well to finish above a Midland Leyton Orient side. Fleetwood to finish above relegation favourites Morecambe, and Grimsby to finish above another relegation favourite in Harrogate. And that pays 8-1. And I honestly think that wins. So if you want to, get your summer holiday fun started, 20 quid on that, thank me in May. That's where I'll leave it, I think. So I talked for long enough. If you've made it this far along the video, well done.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, as well. You've shared a lot of your EFL wisdom with us today. I might be backing a few of those selections myself, so no pressure. Hopefully a few of them do.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope we're all celebrating then.
Yeah.
Hope we're all celebrating.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, as Matt says as well, for watching this video. If you're still here, we appreciate all the support. Let us know your own thoughts down below in the comments. You can check out the rest of our content over on the channel as well. So we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, everyone, for watching.